event organised by the newly formed Lancashire People's Assembly. I'll be chairing the first part of the session, and Mukhtar Mistry, who's just disappeared on me, is going to be chairing the second part. On your behalf, I would like to thank the organisers and sponsors of tonight's event, and especially the acting coordinator, Michael McKrell. There's clipboards going round from the front, and we'd ask you to sign the clipboards. We're looking for some support in the localities after this event. I'd also invite you to contribute to the bucket collections on the doors if you haven't already, or you're able to do so. The money collected on the doors is to help and support financing of tonight's event and future events. But I'd also urge you to, come here and you're spending lots of money, to support the Fireman's Helmet collection that's going round, which is in solidarity with strike and SOAS cleaners. They're outsourced cleaners who are taking strike action on the 4th and 5th of March as part of a campaign to end discrimination and win equivalent sick pay, holiday and pension entitlements in the University of London College. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our panel of speakers to you and thank them in advance for taking the time to support this event. Sam Fairbairn, who's National Secretary of the National People's Assembly Organisation, Sheila Coleman, the Unite Union Community Coordinator, who's going to be speaking on the bedroom tax, Paul Jenkins at the end from the Unite Against Fascism, who's the North West Regional Organiser, and Mike Lavalette, who's National Coordinator from the Social Work Action Network. And finally, Owen Jones, writer, journalist and campaigner. But before I introduce our first speaker, we have a group of workers who are taking strike action in Preston this week, and we've been asked by the local UCU branch if the Chair, Michael McKrell, could take a few minutes of our time to tell you about their dispute.
Thank you very much, Janet, and thank you for the invitation to address this assembly this evening. Michael McKrell, I'm Branch Chair of the University and College Union at the University of Central Lancashire. As you know, the university is a long-standing fixture of the city. It began life as the Institute for the Diffusion of Useful Knowledge way back in 1828. Subsequently, it was known as the Harris Art College, the Harris Institution, Lancashire Poly, and since 1992, University of Central Lancashire, the 8th largest university in the UK in terms of numbers. And throughout all this time, it's been developed as a civic and public asset for the benefit of the people of this community, the region, and further afield. And in November 2012, the University Board attempted to change the university's corporate status from a public higher education corporation to a private company limited by guarantee, with the aim of attracting investments from private investments, largely to finance its overseas ventures, including attracting private equity investment from overseas. Thanks to a concerted campaign of anti-privatisation led by my branch with the support of student activists, other unions and the excellent support of Preston Trades Council and the wider community, their plan was defeated. But it didn't put an end to their behaviour, so although they weren't privatised in form and in legal status, they've begun to behave as though they are in fact a private organisation, with the former VC now becoming the CEO of UPlan Global. Yes, it is a university, it's not a chain of used car dealerships, it is a university, because although privatisation in legal terms has failed, the university has persisted in expanding its global ambitions. These have resulted in serious shortcomings and are a squandering of a public inheritance paid for and supported by the people of this city, this region and for the benefit of local young people. These include developments in Cyprus. The campus in Cyprus has attracted the criticism of none other than the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon, who insisted that it had been built in an unauthorised zone, in the green zone between the Greek and Cypriot areas of that divided island, and is losing money hand over fist. There is the debacle which you may have read about in the press about Thailand, the loss of 3.2 million that we know about and another 9 million that we don't yet know about. 3.2 million, by the way, is the amount that the university wants to save in slashing academic jobs. I'll come to that at the end of my speech. And then there's Sri Lanka. Plans to build a campus in Sri Lanka. That country attempting to rebuild itself in the aftermath of a terrible civil war. The university is negotiating with government ministers with blood on their hands who may well find themselves in war crimes tribunals before very long, and in the teeth of concerted opposition by academics and students in that country who do not want private overseas universities being built in their country. They want to rebuild their own infrastructure for their own people through their own resources. Nevertheless, the university is insisting that that will be paid for, and it will be paid for by the fees. As you know, we stood shoulder to shoulder with students in opposing students' fees. Now students are paying £9,000 a year. That money should be at least going to fund their education. It should not be being siphoned off into these risky gambles overseas. And management has since introduced cuts in order to stave off those losses that it has incurred so far. And it announced 75 academic job losses. It's seeking, it says, to achieve many of those through so-called voluntary redundancy. We know how voluntary redundancy is being used. It's being used as a form of compulsion to force people out, to force experienced lecturers out in order to hire low-grade, downgraded staff. And this goes hand in hand with an attack on our terms and conditions. And those who've given years of dedicated service to students are being forced out, while management introduces measures to downgrade those who are left and introduce whole swathes of low-grade staff, thus with a detrimental effect on the student experience and on learning and on the quality of higher education in this country. It's to resist these cuts and to preserve our terms and conditions that Clan UCU will be taking 2 days of strike action this coming Thursday and Friday, and 2 further days of strike action on the 17th and 18th. We'll also be holding a rally at Adelphi Roundabout at 1 o'clock on Thursday, and we invite you all to join us. Our battle is part of the wider struggle to defend education, to defend the public and civic against commercial interests, to put people before profit, and I thank you very much for listening.